Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. So in today's video I'm going to show you how to replace the spark plugs on the updated 2GR-FKS 3.5 liter Toyota and Lexus V6 engines. This is a follow-up to the previous video that I did on the 2GR-FE, the old school version of this engine. In today's video we're going to be focusing on the new one, and you guys will have some good news. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. If you are a returning subscriber, well, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. Without further ado, let's get to work. Small overview before we get started. This engine requires spark plugs every 60,000 miles, not 120,000 miles. Many people have went the 120,000 miles, and that's actually incorrect. At least in the US models, you still want to check your maintenance guide to make sure if you're outside the US, but in the US, it is every 60,000 miles. Folks, as far as parts, you're going to need a few parts other than the spark plugs themselves. Please use original parts. It is not worth it. This engine is very technologically advanced. You do need the original spark plugs. Or you can find the exact equivalent number from the exact manufacturer, whether it's Denso, NGK. You need the exact number because these engines are very sensitive to spark plugs. I thought I'd bring this up. The good news is in all models, you do not need to remove the cowl at all, regardless if it's a minivan, it's a Highlander like this one, or it's on the Lexus side, the ES. You do not need to remove the cowl at all, and the RX as well. First step is remove the engine cover. Very simple, it pops right out. Let's remove the intake hose. Now, this might vary slightly between the models. Like, this is a 2021 Highlander that we're working on today. The 17 to 20 Sienna and 17 to 19 Highlander, this hose will be more here because the air box is where the battery is. There, these two are flipped. So this is super simple. Don't be afraid of this. We're just going to pop any hoses that are in our way, and then we're going to loosen the clamp here, and take it out. Then on all the models, you're going to have a breather hose right here. We're just going to pull that breather hose out, pull the whole thing. You actually do not need to disconnect the hose. You can disconnect the hose and leave this, but this pops out super easy in most of these. So just pop it out, leave it to the side, and let's pull our intake hose out. There we go. That's out of the way. Let's put it to the side. Then we're going to get the purge valve out of the way. Very simple. Just disconnect the connector, squeeze here, pop the connector out, set it to the side. You don't need to disconnect this hose, the big one. You do have one small hose that is connected to the intake right here. So we're just going to pull that out, just like so. Then we got one 12mm bolt right here. And then the whole valve is loose. You're just going to take it and kind of set it to the side. Then we're going to remove our throttle body and set it to the side. The reason we're removing the throttle body is to save you from draining the coolant and disconnecting the coolant lines to the throttle body. Just disconnect it from the plenum and set it to the side. Let's go ahead and remove those four 10mm bolts. Then right by the throttle body and more underneath it, a little bit toward the back, you're going to find one bracket right there. I hope you can see it very well. This bracket right here. There's a 12mm bolt here and a 12mm bolt at the bottom. We're not going to remove this bracket, and follow me here. You might read the repair manual, it'll tell you to remove this bracket. Do not remove it. You're only going to loosen the top bolt. Let me go ahead and loosen that. Just like that. We're not going to remove it. We're just going to loosen it. The second thing is this hose right here that goes to the vacuum pump. We're going to disconnect it. Just like so. Leave it disconnected and on top, not at the bottom. Then this hose for the booster, just remove it and set it to the side for now. Disconnect this connector right here. Pull this hose out. You can pull it from either side. I usually recommend you pull it from this side because then it's out of your way. Disconnect it, set it to the side. Leave it plugged in the PCV valve right here. Now we're going to remove the 12mm nuts and bolts from here that hold the plenum in. Every time you remove a plastic component, or actually any component like this that is torqued down, you want to start from the outside in. So we're going to remove alternate outside, then go inside last. We're going to do something that is different than the book. And follow me here because I am making this super simple for you, because this is a shortcut that we discovered that really doesn't hurt anything and makes this super easy. Do you see this little stud? And this is on the side of the throttle body. You can see the opening for the throttle body right here. We're going to remove this stud. And in order to remove that stud, all you need is a 6mm socket. So that 6mm socket actually sits on the head of that stud. So let's go ahead and remove that stud. You're only removing the one stud. Here's how that looks like. You're only removing that side, not the other one on the other side. The one right here. We're not removing this one, we're only removing this. Now we've gotten everything out, let's go ahead and pull the plenum. There's a specific way you're going to pull this plenum. You're going to pull it up and then kind of turn like this way. You're going to do this because you're trying to clear this bolt as well. I hope you caught that on video. It's super simple to pull out. Going back in is a little tighter. The thing is though, don't just yank it out of the car because you're still connected. There's a vacuum hose that is connected on that side. It's kind of difficult to disconnect and chase all that. If you want, you can get to the back of the plenum and disconnect it. But honestly, you don't even need to disconnect it. You're just going to take this plenum, set it to the side like so, and now you have access to the back spark plugs. Before you do anything else, as soon as you remove the plenum, you are going to want to cover the intake manifold. If something falls here, bolt, tool, whatever the case may be, you're in big trouble. So cover it up with some rags. You can use masking tape. Do not use duct tape or anything to cover it up. You can use masking tape. I usually just put a couple rags. And you need to be aware of these. Make sure they're always here. They never move, because if you drop something here and you happen to drop it in a valve that is open, that goes on top of the piston. And now, engine out time. That's a disaster, so be very careful with this. Make sure you cover this. And folks, this is the part where I'm gonna apologize to you because the view is not the best. Your coils are right here. This is simple, but it's really difficult to film, especially with the cowl in place. So the main thing I want you to take is, there is one wire harness right here, this one. On most of the models, it'll have a 10mm bolt that you're gonna take out. And that'll free it up a little bit to move so you can pull your coils. The coils have an improved connector. Disconnect the connectors from the coils first, then remove the 10mm bolts for the coils. By the way, folks, if you're wondering what tools I'm using, this is a Milwaukee cordless 1/4-inch ratchet, and this is a 1/4-inch swivel impact. All of these tools are available on my Amazon store, affiliate store. If you're interested in buying some professional tools, they're somewhat expensive, but not crazy. The stuff I put on there are not professional grade, Snap-on, Matco, whatever, but this is really good. It makes your life much easier doing DIY work. Now that we've got them apart, you're gonna be careful with this fuel line. Try not to overstretch it. It connects right here. You can pop it off and kind of move it side to side so you can maneuver the coils out. This is a high pressure fuel pump right here. There's the first coil. Remember, with the coils, I always tell you about this rubber seal. Make sure that comes out with. Here's the second coil. And here's the third coil. I wanted to pull them all out so you can see that this is simple. You just kind of move the harness back and forth out of your way. Don't push too hard on something. They all come out with ease, as you've seen. Let's remove the spark plugs. You're going to want to use a swivel socket. It'll just make your life easier. This is, by the way, 5/8. It's also on the Amazon affiliate store page. So, by the way, if you hear my voice kind of cutting in and out, and the reason for that is you're going to do some mechanic yoga, where you jump on top of the car, have your legs hanging off the car to get to these, because in the case of the TNGA ones, like this 2021 Highlander, the engine is really low, and you got to reach over that big grill to get to the back. So I usually like to loosen the spark plugs by hand and then use a power tool to bring them all the way out. I'm just going to disconnect this high pressure pump. Don't forget to plug it back. Here's that spark plug. So you notice I wanted to show you this intentionally, and I did it intentionally so you can see it. You see how the spark plug is wet? And I did this intentionally. This engine is cold. I started outside, pulled it in the garage, and started working on it. This is normal, folks. If you do the same thing, this is normal. This is just wet gasoline. Remember, engines will run rich when they're cold, and if you didn't drive it much, this is what happens. And all that gasoline that's being dumped around ends up on the spark plug. It hasn't had a chance to really go away yet. Another thing on the spark plugs, I've said this in multiple videos, when you see a mark at the tip of the spark plug, looks like almost like a letter N on this one. It could be a multiple different mark, but this mark at the tip of the spark plug, that indicates this is an OEM plug. This is from the factory. Let me go ahead and remove the other two plugs, and we'll reinstall everything back. Let's reinstall our spark plugs here. No NICs. Remember, I told you this in every video. You do not use NICs on these plugs, and you're going to torque them to spec every single time. If you torque them to spec, you do not have to worry about NICs. So let me go ahead and fast forward through this. I'll just put the 3 plugs back and torque them to spec. Which the spec is 13 foot-pound on all of these 2GR-FKS engines. Before we install our coils, if you unplugged any connectors, plug them back to remove the spark plugs. Let's put our coils. Folks, it doesn't matter which order these go, they're all the same. Many of you asked in the previous spark plug video if you should replace these. Honestly, if you're doing this yourself, don't, because this is very easy, and if a coil goes out, just replace it down the road. It's not that hard, as you've seen in this video. It's super simple to do this, much easier than the previous one. If you're paying someone to do this, maybe, but I wouldn't replace coils. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the nice thing about these coils, and I gotta point that out before thank you Toyota moment, these are flexible, so you can actually kind of install it. Don't bend it too much, but they're a little more flexible. The old ones were tough and you had to install them perfectly straight. These you can kind of flex them a little bit and makes installation much easier. Just install the 3 bolts. One thing I will say about the bolts for the coils, folks, this is a plastic valve cover. If you're not sure with your torque specs, you can torque it down to 7 foot-pounds. That's the official torque. I actually encourage you to do so because we've seen a case of the sleeve pulling off the plastic valve cover when somebody over-tightened this guy. So torque them to spec, it's 7 foot-pound. Plug your connectors back and then put that 1 bolt we removed for the harness. This also plugs into the valve cover. Now you're pretty much done with the back, and before we put the plenum, make sure everything's sitting right. If you probably moved this fuel line, make sure it sits right. Double check everything. Make sure you didn't disconnect something that you're forgetting. If in case you disconnected anything extra to make your life easier, this is the time to double check it. Make sure everything is good. Let's install our plenum back. First, you're going to remove the gasket, and you notice this is the first change from this. This is a 1-piece gasket. The old one has 3 pieces. Always install a new gasket. To make this easier for you, this gasket will have this little part that's sticking out. You're going to find that part on the plenum, which is going to be right here. So you're just going to start that part first, and then everything else will sit in place. Perfect. There's only one of those, so it's very simple to install it. So you wouldn't worry about is this upside down or not. It only goes one way. Here's that little bolt that we loosened. And here's that vacuum deal in the back where that vacuum hose is. That is still connected. You can unplug it, of course, but I'll leave that one up to you. Before we install our plenum, you're going to remove your towels that you installed to protect. Kind of wipe down the surface. If there's any dirt, make sure you push it away, not inside the engine. If there's a little bit of oil, that's normal. Just wipe it down and we're ready to install it. Let's install our plenum. And I want you to watch a few things. First of them is this guy right here. Remember we unplugged it from the air hose? Make sure that that sits underneath the plenum and it's free, it's not pinched. So, here's how you're gonna install this. You're gonna be careful with your vacuum hose in the back, all the way in the back here. Don't let that get underneath and get stuck. You're kinda gonna push it. Make sure that vacuum hose doesn't get in your way. You're gonna start it on the one stud. Just kind of set it down. And then you're gonna go on the back where that bolt that we loosened. And you're gonna make sure that that's lining up and that the vacuum hose for the vacuum pump is not in the way. You're gonna get to a point where it just sits down. That bolt is engaged, our one stud is engaged, it's still loose. Make sure none of your vacuum hoses are held up in the back and stuck. They should all be free. Suggestion, because this could get frustrating if you lose your orientation. Take a picture before you take all this out so you know where the vacuum hoses routes, just so you can save yourself the frustration. Before we move any further, you gotta make sure this hose is free. It's not pinched underneath the intake manifold, and it moves back and forth freely, and it's not all the way behind. This is very important. Before you tighten any of the bolts, we're gonna install our stud first. The stud goes all the way in the side where the throttle body is toward the back. You're just gonna start it. Then we're gonna tighten it down with our 6mm. This actually does not need to be tight. It just needs to be run down until it stops. So don't crank on it. Now let's install our bolts and nuts. We're gonna need to torque those to spec. And the spec for this one is gonna be 15 foot-pounds. You're gonna start in the middle, work your way out. Let me tighten these real quick. We'll continue. Plug our connector right here back. Put our PCV hose back. Let's install our vacuum hose back for the vacuum pump. And then the brake booster hose. Let's tighten that 12mm down there. Now we're ready to install the throttle body. Let's go ahead and put a new gasket. It is up to you if you want to reuse those gaskets. I'd replace them though. They're a few bucks, it's not worth it. You get a vacuum leak later, especially as these things get older. There's more risk of a vacuum leak. Start the bolts, we'll torque them down. Torque spec for the throttle body is 7 foot-pounds. At this point, let's put our purge valve back. Plug the connector back, put the hose on the plenum back. Now let's install our intake back. Always watch the orientation of these hoses. Make sure they go under, over. Take a picture before, just to make life easier for you. Tighten the clamps. Put our hoses in the correct orientation. This is what makes a quality job, folks. When you put everything back where it belongs. Not just leave things hanging out, not clipped in. Yes, they won't cause an effect on function, but that's what distinguishes the car care nuts from just someone who just wants to get the job done as quick as possible. At this point, you're pretty much set with the hard part. Let's celebrate a job well done by doing the easy part in a few seconds. There you have it, folks. This was super simple. Before we wrap up this video, I want to say one thing. Most folks that do these kind of jobs, they're always upset. This was a pain. It took me forever. I'm not happy. Here's a small piece of advice from a mechanic who does this every single day and 10 times. This is nothing. This is very simple. Find the joy in what you do. Take pride in what you do and enjoy it. Because if you don't enjoy it, it's just a chore. You might as well pay someone else and push that chore away and be done with it. Find the joy, take your time, clean everything, do everything right, explore around, look around how everything is wired, everything is put together. Have fun, take pride in what you do, and everything will go smoothly. And if something is not going, just like every mechanic will tell you, stop, take a walk, go drink some water, go talk to your kids, to your wife, to your friend, whoever the case may be, and then come back after 15 minutes. Everything will go smoothly. I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new, and I hope when you do this job on your car, it goes very smoothly and very simple, and you enjoy it and you take pride in it. If you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos, and until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.